The question that so many people ask themselves is, why do I keep starting something and then stopping? Why do I say I want to change, but then struggle to follow through? Why do I make plans, set goals, and promise myself that this time is going to be different, and yet somehow end up right back in the same place? Most people think that this answer is discipline. They think they need more motivation, more willpower, more structure. But in most cases, follow through is not a discipline problem. It's a self-trust problem. And today, we're going to talk about the real reason that most people struggle with the follow through on the life that they actually want. Welcome to the Inner Launch. This is where we talk about creating your next chapter from the inside out. Not by forcing productivity or chasing motivation, but by understanding the deeper emotional and psychological patterns that shape our decisions. Because most people don't struggle with change because they're lazy. They struggle because something inside of them is causing them to still try and feel safe. And when you understand that, you stop fighting yourself. And you learn how to be that main character in your life and start living your life differently. One of the biggest myths in personal growth is that change starts with motivation. But motivation is a temporary and emotional state. It comes and goes. And when people use motivation to create long-term change in their life, they often feel like they are starting over, time and time again. And that is why so many people experience cycles like these. They feel inspired, they set new goals, they make a plan, and for a short time, everything feels possible. But eventually, something shifts. Life gets busy, doubt appears, fear shows up, and suddenly that momentum disappears. Not because they don't care, but because that motivation was never meant to carry that entire weight of the change. It will feel like you are so inspired to start, and you start, you have the inspiration, and then suddenly it's like, okay, I'm not inspired anymore. I know I want this, it doesn't seem to be working, so I just kind of need to take a break. And once you take that break, it's so hard to get back on that wagon. So I know for me that when it comes to social media, I have a love-hate relationship with it. I'd like to say that I love it, but really it can be a lot of work. And I don't always like spending hours and hours on social media. So it's one of those things where, like, I've set my goal. I've told myself that I'm going to post every single day and it's going to work out. And just like that, people are going to come to me. They're going to know what I do, how to help them, everything. And it's going to be the best. And then sometimes when we don't start seeing those results in the way that we want, because we were so inspired in the beginning, we don't keep that same follow through. So when I didn't see those results, I kind of started to say, it's okay if I don't do it because nothing's working anyway, so why do I need to keep going? And it just becomes a pattern because you know that you can't continue to do things based off of inspiration, based off of motivation. You have to have that deep down inside of you, that drive inside of you. And it's not just for business, it's for anything. And if you think that just by you doing the repetitive motions is going to get you somewhere, you don't really care too much about it, but you want it done, you have to have that inner force within you that makes you go after what you want. It's not just like putting it out into the air and hoping it'll fall back down and it'll happen. You have to actively take those steps, because if you're just relying on throwing something up and catching it, it may not happen. That follow through is deeply connected to self-trust. And self-trust is something that a lot of people unknowingly lose over time. Every time you make a promise to yourself and you break it, a small crack forms. Every time you say you're going to change something and you don't, your brain remembers it. Eventually, your mind starts to question everything that you say because it remembers that you didn't have that follow through before. This happens in a subtle way. Like, I'll try, maybe later. I'll start next week. Over time, that inner confidence that you had that you were going to do it and have that momentum starts to become weaker every time that you say, I'll do this when. And when self-trust weakens, taking action becomes even harder. Sometimes it's the fear of failure. Sometimes it's the fear of success. Because growth doesn't just change your habits, it changes your identity. It changes your relationships. It changes the expectations that people have of you. And that kind of change can feel debilitating. So your brain creates resistance, not because you're incapable, but because some part of you is still adjusting to the idea of becoming this different version of you. And this is called procrastination. A lot of procrastination is actually emotional avoidance. Certain actions will trigger your discomfort. Maybe rejection, maybe vulnerability, maybe it's uncertainty. And instead of confronting those feelings directly, your brain starts to look for easier tasks. Like checking your phone, reorganizing your plans, waiting for the right moment. The problem is that avoidance temporarily reduces discomfort. But it's also delaying your growth. A time that I realized that I was avoiding something was telling my story. I have a story that I wanted to tell about my life for so long, and I didn't do it because I wondered what people would say. I didn't want to hear the negativity, and I didn't really think that it was going to go over well. I thought of all the reasons why somebody wouldn't like my story, even though I also felt like I needed to share my story to inspire others. But in that moment, I also knew that I was avoiding it because of the feelings that I would feel towards it. Not because anything was right or wrong, but because I didn't want to deal with those feelings. So I didn't tell my story that I knew would inspire others for probably at least 2 months. I avoided that feeling for 2 months. And I remember once I told my story, I messaged a group that I was in and I said, hey, if anyone would like to support this, I would really appreciate it. And so here I thought I was going to get like 3 likes or whatever. And that wound up being the most likes I've ever had on any of my posts because people resonated with it. I didn't get the criticisms that I thought I was going to get. I didn't get all the negativity that was in my head. That was just in my head. And that's why I was avoiding it, because I was avoiding what I thought I was going to feel, not how it was actually going to be. And that realization of knowing that you're avoiding it because you don't want to deal with the feelings, that's the first step. One of the most overlooked steps of the follow-through is your identity. If your self-image still sees you as that old version, you may not get to that new version of you. You may think that you're just the person that overthinks, or starts but doesn't finish, or the person that struggles with discipline. And then here's the thing, your brain reinforces those thoughts. Not because it's true, but because it feels familiar. The way we see ourselves often becomes the blueprint for how we behave. Which means that real change requires more than just new habits. It requires a new concept. If you want to rebuild that follow through in your life, it doesn't start with bigger goals. It starts with keeping more smaller promises. Promises that are small enough that you can keep them consistently. Because every time that you keep a promise to yourself, you're rebuilding your self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of sustainable change. Because you know that when you say you're going to do something, you will. At some point in growth, the focus has to shift. You have to stop asking, how do I feel motivated? And start asking, what kind of person do I want to become? Someone who follows through? Someone who honors their word? Someone who can handle the discomfort long enough to build the life that they want? And that shift changes your identity and the rest of your world. Because when your identity changes, your behavior becomes more sustainable. If you've struggled with that follow through in the past, it does not mean that you lack discipline now. It just means that your self-trust has been damaged by years of broken promises to yourself. But self-trust can be rebuilt. Not through pressure, not through perfectionism, but through small actions that you repeat consistently. And those small actions eventually create the version of you who finishes what they start. This is your reminder that you don't need to have it all figured out. Change doesn't come from rushing it. It comes from paying attention and choosing yourself even in the small ways and keeping those promises. Thank you for listening to The Inner Launch. If this episode resonated with you, share this with a friend who may need to rebuild their self-trust and confidence. And if you're ready to create your next chapter intentionally, you can learn more about working with me in the show notes. Next week, we're going to talk about something that stops many people and why that level of visibility feels surprisingly uncomfortable when your life starts to change. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening. Bye.